Over the last several weeks, lawmakers have been examining several bills that would affect federal employees in different ways. The House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, in particular, recently advanced legislation that may bring changes to federal benefits and hiring practices. Joining me with a review of these bills is Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Nice to see you, Terry.
It's good to hear that there's some movement on bills that would support the federal workforce. Let's talk about one that would raise the pay ceiling for employee buyouts. Tell us more about why lawmakers are considering that change.
Absolutely. So the reason that they are looking into this more closely is because there is currently a cap on what's called the Voluntary Separation Incentive Payment, or VSIP program. Currently, agencies are limited to offering up to $25,000 to federal employees who choose to quit or leave their jobs through that program. But that pay ceiling has not been updated since the mid-1990s, so it's been about 30 years. What they're trying to do here, and the House Oversight Committee recently advanced this legislation with a unanimous vote, is they are going to increase, or looking to increase, the limit on those payments and offering federal employees up to 6 months of their salary with approval from the agency head if they agree to quit their jobs through this program. There's support for the bill across the aisle. And for example, Representative Nick Langworthy, who introduced the legislation, talked about how the current $25,000 cap is a barrier to what he called responsible workforce management. And he explained a little bit more about why he introduced the bill.
This outdated cap has limited agencies' ability to offer competitive voluntary off-ramps. As a result, the federal government often misses opportunities to reduce payroll costs early and instead turns to more expensive and disruptive alternatives such as involuntary separations, extended administrative leave, or simply paying positions that no longer align with mission needs.
And again, that's Representative Nick Langworthy, a Republican from New York. During the committee markup, when they were looking at this bill, there was also support from Congressman James Walkinshaw, a Democrat from Virginia, who supported the legislation and saying that the increase was long overdue. And this is especially considering that even though the program has been around for decades, it's not something that's come into the forefront more recently with the Trump administration's efforts to reduce the workforce and been used a lot more than it has been in the past by agencies.
Well, that bill focuses on departures. There's another one from the Oversight Committee that would push agencies towards skill-based hiring. So tell us more about that approach to bringing more people in.
Absolutely. So we've seen many different variations of this type of legislation over the years. It typically gets bipartisan support, this push towards skills-based hiring. And in this particular instance, there is a bill through the Oversight Committee called the Cybersecurity Hiring Modernization Act. This is another one where it's gotten very strong bipartisan support. It advanced unanimously out of the committee earlier this month. And the idea here is to remove the educational requirements or background for job candidates who apply for cyber roles into different agencies. So this would cover the GS 2210 or IT management series and several other cybersecurity positions where in most cases, unless there's some sort of legal requirement, agencies would not be able to require an educational background like a 4-year college degree. And the idea is to try to open doors to more diverse backgrounds and more diverse candidates and get also a lot more younger employees into these types of positions. This is something that has been pushed on for many years. We've seen efforts from both the Trump and Biden administrations promoting skills-based hiring. And Representative Nancy Mace, who introduced this new legislation, talked a little bit more about her thinking behind the bill.
Degree requirements function as a poor substitute for what actually matters in the labor market: merit, skills, and talent. A diploma may signal someone mostly showed up somewhere for a few years, but it does not reliably indicate whether a worker can perform the tasks a job requires, adapt to new technologies, or contribute productively.
And again, that's Representative Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina. We also have heard recently from Shontel Brown, the Congresswoman from Ohio, who is the Democrat lead co-sponsor of this bill, and she similarly advocated for this move away from educational requirements.
This bill does not lower the qualifications, but instead recognizes educational experience is not one size fits all. It will help level the playing field for veterans, community college graduates, career changers, and people who have had non-traditional educational pathways.
Drew, those last two bills that you mentioned both have bipartisan support, but of course that's not always the case. There's a recent Democrat-led effort on a big federal pay raise. Tell us more about the FAIR Act and its prospects.
This is one that we have come to expect every January or February ahead of what we see in March from the White House's budget request, which usually tees up the initial proposal for next year's federal pay raise. So ahead of that, we typically see the FAIR Act come in for at least the last decade. And it's a little bit different every year in terms of what lawmakers propose through this. But this year, they're looking at a 4.1% pay raise, and this would be a 3.1% raise for all federal employees across the board, and then an average of a 1% locality pay adjustment on top of that. But because this is a Democrat-led bill and doesn't really have a lot of Republican support, the prospects of this advancing are not as likely as you saw some of those other bills. And Congress, even though this bill has been introduced for at least the last 10 years, it's not ever gotten a lot of momentum, and federal pay raises each year tend to fall short of what the bill proposes. But the bill does get a lot of support from employee organizations and federal unions. We heard more about this bill from Doreen Greenwald, national president of the National Treasury Employees Union.
It's vital that federal employees are fairly compensated for the important work they do. If the federal government is to compete for talent and rebuild the workforce, we need to offer competitive pay.
Well, those are three important ones. Are there any other bills that you're tracking right now?
There are several where we saw some movement in December, so just a couple of months ago. At that time, the Oversight Committee advanced several other bills that would also impact federal employees. There are some that just have Republican support, for instance, one about the federal probationary period, and then one that it looks at detailed reporting on federal employees' use of official time. But there was also some bipartisan legislation, one on, again, skills-based hiring, but that time for federal contractors. And then also looking at amending the system for relocation incentives for federal employees. Those bills are all currently under consideration, and they did advance out of the committee, but have not seen much movement since the end of 2025. So those are ones that I'll continue to track for the next couple months.
Drew, do you think now that we have the Federal Workforce Caucus, that will change the prospects for any of these bills?
It's possible. I think that, having federal employees come more into the forefront and more into the conversation from that caucus, it's possible that there could be more conversations and more discussions about pushing some of this legislation forward, but only time will tell.
That's Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for this update.
Thank you, Terry.
You can find her story at federalnewsnetwork.com.